Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo, and we have a good guest I think you guys will be interested in hearing from this week, Anna Lowe. She's a paranormal romance author, among other things, and she's someone who got her start just last year in 2015. So I think she's got that fresh perspective that a lot of you should be interested in. Joe, Jeff, and I have all been doing this for about 6 years now, so we're not quite as in the trenches knowing what it's like to be a brand new author. So let me read Anna's bio, and then I'll let her speak. Anna started reading romance in spite of herself and has enjoyed reading and writing in the genre ever since. On any given weekend, you might find her hiking in the mountains or hunched over her laptop working on her latest story. Either way, the day will end with a chunk of dark chocolate and a good read. Sounds like me. She specializes in paranormal romance and has published numerous books in the Blue Moon Saloon series, the Wolves of Twin Moon Ranch series, and the Shifters in Vegas series, among others, since getting her started in 2015. She made $26,000 her first year, and I think you told me in an email that was only about 9 months of publishing, and then more than $50,000 this year in 2016. So welcome to the show, Anna.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us how you got started with self-publishing and how things have gone this first couple of years?
Sure. How did I get started? It's interesting. I started writing nonfiction years ago, and in the 90s, I actually wrote, that was not self-publishing. I was writing, like a lot of other people, I thought traditional was the only way to go. And I wrote a few travel books for some travel publishers. So I had some experience like producing a large number of words for deadlines. And then I took a break from writing for a long time. And in 2009, I wrote another nonfiction book, which I self-published for the first time. And I originally just did it as paperback, and I eventually got my act together and got the EPUB or the ebook out as well. And then, and then in 2013, 2014, I started writing. Finally got the confidence, I guess you'd say, to write fiction. And I held back my first couple of stories so that I could publish 3 in a row, which I did in the spring of 2015. And it's a pretty good start. So far, so good.
How many books do you have out as of this point? You've really been publishing quite quickly, it seems like.
Yes. I didn't do a count. I've got 6 in one series, 5 in another series, 2 plus 4. So what is that? 11, 17? But I write, I know you guys, I listen to you guys, I'm a fan of the show, and I know that you as fantasy authors write much longer books, and I write generally novella length. Everybody has their own definition, but I wrote mostly around 40,000 word books. Which suits me really well as an author and as a reader as well.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to do it, especially if you're in a genre where that's kind of standard or at least acceptable. It might be tough in epic fantasy if you're doing like 8 point of view characters, but I know I started out longer with everything was over 100,000 words, and I've kind of brought in a little bit, in part because I realized you can't really charge anymore for longer books, but I try to go like 80,000 words now. The last book in my series was 120, but I'm trying. So yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. If you can tell the story and it works for your genre and people aren't disappointed, it sounds great.
Exactly right. And it's my personal preference too. I guess I maybe like a lot of readers, you don't have that much time. I don't want to spend a month reading a book. So it's kind of more satisfying. I like going from story to story, not too quickly, but not too slowly either. So it suits me well. Like I said, as an author, I'm able to produce more regularly than if I were trying to do 100,000 word books. And as a reader, I personally prefer it too.
Right, and it seems like with the romances, you're usually only going to have 2 point of view characters, and maybe not the kind of plot that in epic fantasy you're going to get going over like 8 books. So I think it makes a lot of sense that those could be shorter too. I think we had Anna Hackett on doing sci-fi romance, and she's kind of in that same ballpark with the word count. I just skip ahead in my sentences. But
Yeah, like a lot of people, I think I started writing with the love of my life. What is it? The project of my life kind of fiction I started, and it's still not published. And it's three different time periods, and it goes back and forth into, back into history and back into the current day. And it's got four parallel lines, and it's 100,000 words, and still not published. So, yeah.
yeah, that stuff's definitely harder to get finished and to edit and have it make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And within paranormal romance, are you like drilling down to any sub niche in there, or are you kind of going for the mainstream biggest audience?
Um, I guess I accidentally fell into writing. It's a cross between Western romance and paranormal romance. And I think that actually worked out quite well because there's not a lot of crossover. So at one point, I actually sat down and I looked at some of the top books in paranormal romance. And a lot of them, if you look into the subcategories, they repeat across. They're all vampires and they're all psychics and it's the same books appearing in the same categories. So I'm assuming they're mostly getting the same audience. Yeah. So even if you're in multiple sub lists, you're not actually reaching different people, right? So I think I don't have evidence to back this one up, but it's my feeling that that crossover between two quite different genres helps me. It could be to my advantage because I'm getting some Western readers and some paranormal readers, both saying, well, I'll give it a try. So that might actually, I kind of fell into doing that, but I like that idea. And I will try, as I do new series, I'll probably try again to pick two subgenres that don't intersect that often, that you can have perhaps the appeal to both.
And do you actually put them in the Western category under romance in Amazon?
I do, right? So you get paranormal romance, or I guess, yeah, paranormal romance, and then Western. And then you put in your keywords for all the other, that's where you drill down, and you might say vampires, and you might say shapeshifters, and you might say whatever.
Yeah, that actually seems like when I looked, it's probably been a while, but Western seemed to be one of the least competitive categories under romance. So maybe that's good. You could actually hit a top 100 there as a newer author.
Yeah. Like I said, I think I've managed to get top 100 pretty much on both sides or in many of the sublists, but I think theoretically it's different readers. So that appeals to me too.
Has anyone complained that they wanted rancher cowboy romance and there were some vampires in there?
I haven't heard a complaint. Maybe they didn't buy book two, but no, I haven't heard the complaint.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
Now, the paranormal romance seems to be kind of up there with urban fantasy as probably the most competitive of the fantasy subgenres. Did you find it challenging to break in, or you mentioned doing 3 books. Did that help things out a lot?
It definitely helped, and I guess I was lucky to have. I contacted one or two authors when I was getting my books ready, and I was on a couple of forums and got a lot of really good advice. So that was really helpful to the way that authors are willing to share a lot of advice, so I could learn from them. But I was also lucky. I wrote to one or two authors saying, well, I really admire your work, and I don't presume that you have time to answer my questions, but if you ever wanted to write a blog post for other authors or new up-and-coming authors, these are my burning questions. And I was really lucky that one or two authors answered those directly and said, no, I do have the time, or I will take the time to answer you. And they made some good suggestions too, got me into some Facebook groups that I wasn't aware of at the time, with a lot of very eager, voracious paranormal romance readers, and also some authors groups as well. So that really helped get started. And yeah, of course, 3 books in short succession was a good way to start too.
Okay, yeah, it does seem like in the last couple of years there's been kind of the rise of the Facebook groups, and if you can find the right ones, it can be a really good networking opportunity. And it sounds like you're saying that these were groups with readers in it too, so were you able to kind of plug the books when you release them?
Yes, both. So there's author groups and separate readers groups, and they both it was great because I could ask questions of other authors. I made a couple of really good critique partners who were incredibly helpful. And then on the reader side, I could plug the books, and I found some ARC readers. I started to create an ARC team based on that, and just started to get word out. So that my first book I had in pre-order for a month before it came out, I think. And it launched really well for my expectations at the time for, the very first book. So this may be one thing that I could share tonight is great to get so much really helpful advice. And you hear a lot of it repeated, so I don't think we need to repeat a lot of it, but it's also interesting. A lot of the advice, although very well-meaning, and I'm so grateful to the authors who shared it, you get advice from people who've been doing it for years and years, and it doesn't necessarily apply to newbies. And this is something that I discovered as I went along, and I started thinking, well, I kind of got to at least I don't know how to say it, the confidence maybe, or just figured I'll take the risk, and even though I appreciate the advice, I'm not going to actually follow certain pieces. And some things I'm glad I did, that I think that doesn't apply to new authors.
Is there anything specific that comes to mind, like as a warning that you might want to share with others, that maybe you don't need to do this, or this is what I did that worked well?
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of things that really stood out in hindsight. And one of them was the advice that short stories don't sell, or short stories are not really worthwhile, because generally you can only sell them for 99 cents. It doesn't make a lot of money. They're not as popular among readers. And that is all absolutely true. But as a new author and as a person who's still working a full-time job, it was great. I originally held back books so I can release 3 full titles back to back. But I cannot write a book a month, or even 2 books a month. Some of the paranormal romance authors are just so prolific. It's just unbelievable. But I can write a short story in, maybe a weekend, maybe 2 weekends. So that advice, I think that, yeah, short stories, maybe it's not where the money is. It might not be a good long-term strategy, but it was fantastic for bridging the gap and keeping audience interest or reader interest high from release to release. So that worked really, really well, in fact, so that I had the first 3 books out, and then I would have had a much longer gap to book 4, but I plugged that gap with a short story, I think maybe even 2 short stories at the time. And eventually, once I built up my backlists, what I could do is I took those short stories and bundled them together, and now I have a $2.99 title that I can sell for a 70% profit versus 99-cent titles that I get 35% profit. So it was really good as a short-term solution. So that's one thing that I would suggest to new authors, that if you're not able to produce as regularly as some of the other authors, you want to keep your readers happy. You want to maybe hook them on the next character that's coming up, but that book's not quite ready. Short stories are a great way to do that, actually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's good to point out that it's not just about how much money I'm going to make from this project, but the readers are voracious, especially in romance, but even in fantasy, in science fiction, they expect new stuff every month, especially if you kind of set that precedent by releasing quickly in the beginning. So yeah, I would definitely agree that putting out a short story could be a way to keep them excited about your series and give them a little something in between the longer releases.
Yeah, and I guess the covers were, I kept my costs down as well because I wasn't sure how it was going to go. So the covers, basically the short stories that I started with, were kind of the happily ever after, deeper look into the continuing story of the couple from book 1. So I just took the cover of book 1 and did a color wash, the way you sometimes see for a serial. I just did a color wash and put a different title on it. So it was a very cheap cover. It was short, so the editing wasn't very expensive. So I wasn't sure that it was going to work well, but since it's not like I was investing hundreds and hundreds in it, it was a low-risk gamble, and it really paid off, actually.
Excellent. And I have to admit, even though it's been 6 years, I did the same thing my first year or two. I've kind of drifted away from short stories now since I write novels more quickly, but I was about 5, 6 months between releases with the novels, and I would put some short stories or something out in between for the same reasons, pretty much.
Right, exactly. And now you don't need to. So that advice holds. Short stories aren't as worth your while. Yeah. But in your first year or so, or maybe, whatever length of time it takes you to settle into your groove, short stories are a good way to go.
Definitely. Did you have any other, is there any other advice that you wanted to share
Yeah.
there?
I've got, I think, two more. The other one was really good advice, but again, doesn't always apply, which is never make anything but book one free. Um, and I've heard that many times, and it is, like I said, really good advice. Like, you don't want to be making book two free and then book three free and book four free, because people will just wait for the sales and they'll never buy them at full price. But when you're a new author, you only have one series. There's promotional opportunities out there, but let's say you've already made book one free for a certain period of time, and this is before I made a perma-free title. So I was perfectly happy making book two free for a period of time, because it got me many more readers. And that's when I was still building my newsletter list and still trying to build my platform. So at that point, when I only had one series, yes, it made a lot of sense actually to discount books 2 and 3 until I started a second series and now a third series. So when you have 3 series, you have 3 different book ones that you can promote, and you can just keep promoting book one, and hopefully the people will sell. It will sell through to book 2 and 3 and 4. But until you reach that point, it really didn't hurt, it seems to me, to take advantage of some of the promotional opportunities I had by putting in book 2 or book 3. So that would be another thing that worked well for me. And I think all of these things, you kind of just have to decide for yourself. You have to see where you are, what your goals are, and what fits. This might not work for somebody else, but I'm glad I tried it and it worked well for me. So definitely things to consider.
Yeah, I've actually done that too with my pen name that does the science fiction romances, because you can jump in at book 4 and it's a complete story in and of itself with its own couple. And with that series, I'm in KU, so I'm like, why not? I have these free days, I might as well try to book a promo and do a book that hasn't already been featured on the other sites. So I think, especially for romance, why not? It's they're complete stories. So I don't know how yours is. I'm just kind of assuming that each one is a happily ever after or happily for now. Is that right?
Exactly right. Yeah. So it's each just a different couple, and it winds up, but I always plant really strong hooks. So the main supporting character of book one is then the hero of book two. And in book two, we have a new friend or side character who becomes quite prominent, and that's the person in book three. So I personally hate cliffhangers. I wouldn't like to do cliffhangers. But it's a really good way to get people to read from book to book, and yet you still have standalone stories. So people can enter the series at book 3 or book 4, whatever.
Definitely. Romance can definitely work with that. I might be a little leery of making like book 6 in my ongoing series where you have to have read the first 5 books to understand what's going on as the free one. But like I said, I've done it with the romance with the pen name for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, that definitely work well. And then generally, a lot, a lot of the advice is out there. There's such good advice. So this is not to say that I absolutely did appreciate how free people were with sharing their hard-earned knowledge, right? Because you learn from your mistakes and then you share it with other people. They like make fewer mistakes. So I really appreciate that. But sometimes you see the conclusions that people reach on fairly limited data, and you kind of like, you read it and you're like, well, I am not really sure that makes sense to me. Yeah. Um, and I think all authors, how many authors really have that much data? How many people have 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 books that they can, in different genres where they've covered the different bases, that they can really then draw a conclusion and say, this is the one factor. I can isolate it down to this factor and therefore draw the conclusion that. There was one discussion at one point, just as an example, that somebody posted a question. Is it, should you start with a hero's point of view in the first chapter or the heroine's point of view in the first chapter? And the couple of established authors came in and said, absolutely, positively has to be the hero's point of view in chapter 1. And it really made me think. I thought, oh my goodness, have I been doing this wrong all along? And I go back and I look at a lot of successful books and from authors from the beginning wrote heroine in the first chapter. And it didn't seem to me that that's just one example. And that was their conclusion, but I'm not sure it would hold up under scientific scrutiny. And none of us can really do a scientific sample, but I think take everything you hear with a grain of salt, because it worked for one person, which is fantastic, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So if you have a good reason for doing what you're doing or what you're trying, why not go for it instead of kind of blindly buying into every piece of advice that's out there. So I'm kind of glad. Again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm not grateful, because there's so much great advice that I profited from. But I think it's good to be a critical thinker too.
For sure. And I agree that, it's, even when you have a lot of books out, sometimes it's not, you can kind of guess to why this series or this book did better than other ones, but it is going to be different for each author, because you have different readers that are attracted to your style and they have different preferences. And sometimes you just get lucky with a book doing well. You released it at the right time of year, or somebody big mentioned it on their blog or something. So it's hard to say that it's any one specific thing.
Right, exactly. Or you might be writing one series about, I don't know, swords and fantasy, and then the next series is more, what do I know, elves. And it's really hard to say, oh, well, now it's because I started with a hero's point of view is why it was so successful. Well, it's elves versus it's different. Yeah. So it's really hard, I think, to isolate those, like you just said, it's hard to isolate those factors.
Although we do know from the past that dragons and spaceships sell books. So
there we go.
It's proven.
Note to self.
Don't listen to me. It's not proven. It just seems that way. All right. Well, let me pass you to the guys to ask a few more questions, and then we'll get into some marketing stuff a little later in the show.
Sounds good.
All right. So my first question is, we've heard from a couple of romance authors, and you spoke about this a little bit, but it can be a struggle writing a series in romance, because having a recurring core cast is you can't have the full cast continue to the next story. And you said that you like to have a secondary character who sort of is the connective tissue. Like, how else would you say is a worthwhile way to define a series?
Definitely in romance, I haven't thought so much about other genres, but in romance, it really works well to start with a set of characters, like a family, and each person has their dedicated book, and so readers can kind of predict, well, we had the older brother, now at some point the younger brother gets his turn, kind of thing. That's one way to do it, and that's what I always do. My second series, kind of by accident, I came upon a second way to kind of have an overarching arc, which is that the villain kind of is defeated in book one, but not defeated for forever. So that the villain is going to come back, and that worked quite well. And actually, the odds got higher and higher, and the stakes got higher and higher from book to book to book. So in book two, we move on to the other brother, and the bad guy is back, and he's even worse than he was before. And the little sister is there helping. And now in book three, again, now she's got her love story going. But guess what? The bad guys are coming back because we won the battle, but not the war, kind of thing. So both those things work pretty well, it seems.
I don't think I've ever heard having the villain as the recurring thing, and I think it's an excellent idea. And it sort of flows into the next question I had, which was, with things like action movies and really any particularly successful genre that starts to saturate, lots of times the audience sort of has escalating expectations, and like they sort of need more from each subsequent entry in order to be the same level of satisfied. And do you sort of feel like as a series continues, you have to continue to raise the bar like that, even in romance?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm trying to actually get myself not to write too long series. And this is something I've learned or I've observed from authors like Elle Thorne, who I really admire. She's done a really great job with her series. Rather than going into like the book of course, I've done it. Now I have 6 books in the first series and 5 books in the second series. But really, I think once you get to book 3, it's time to think about starting a new series, and might be a related series, right? So, and that worked well for me. That the Twin Moon Ranch series overlapped with the Blue Moon Saloon series. So you can still get to revisit the characters that you like. You still see little cameos. But it's a whole new series, so that got me another book 1, another entry to my works. So I think it doesn't answer your question directly, but rather than I'm trying not to write books 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm trying to get a way to start a new series, kind of label it as a new series, even though it still has not references back. It will still be standalone, but it will still have some familiar characters, maybe like the way Star Wars, the recent Star Wars, not the brand new one. I haven't gotten to see that yet, but last year's, whatever, I can't remember what it's called. Right,
The Force Awakens.
The Force Awakens, right? So those of us who are old enough, we're still in love with, Han Solo and the rest of them. That we appreciated that, but the new viewers still loved it from just that movie. So I think that personally, that's what I'm going to try to do in the next 2 or 3 seasons of writing is cap it at 3 and then move on to a new series. Or as I recently did, I got to book 3, finished books 1, 2, and 3 in the new series, started another series. But once those were up, then I wrote book 4 and book 5 of that previous series. So I kind of don't like leaving them because you get so invested in your world and your characters. So part of me doesn't want to leave, but if you can have a spin-off series, it's a good way to keep enjoying your world and yet not dragging it out too long, but keeping your audience.
It's interesting, like how different how widely varied the different techniques are, because in fantasy, for example, a lot of the advice we get is it's not even really a series until you get to the 3rd one. Like, get at least 3 out and then start thinking about how to market the full series. And it seems like in romance, you can sort of top things off as a set of trilogies. And clearly both methods are successful in their given genres.
It seems like, and I keep hearing that series doesn't really take off until 5 books. So in my first series, I put out book 5 and I was kind of like waiting, with bated breath,
Right.
Like, now it's going to happen.
The math works, right?
Book 5. Yeah. So readers, if you build it, they shall come.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, it's great because the sell-through is really good. But I think I'm wiser doing a spin-off series. And in fact, I'm thinking of eventually that first series, the Twin Moon series, I will have 6 books in it. The 6th book is coming out in March. And rather, even though I have books 7 and 8 and 9 in my mind, I'm just going to relabel it, give it a different series, and start it with a slightly different theme. But it's essentially, book 1 in that future series equals book 7 in the original series.
Yeah.
Because I do, like I said, I really admire Elthorn is one. She has tons of series and little trilogy, and not little trilogies, but she bundles them up, and she has a sale here, a sale there, but they all they all interlink. So the sell through from series to series is very high, and I think that's for me personally, that seems like a good way to go.
Yeah, plus a long series can be a little daunting for a new reader. They don't want to have to, they don't want to see that, oh, well, book 9 is out, and that means I have to read 8 other books in order to understand that book. I'll just pick something that's a little bit shorter and less of a homework assignment.
Exactly. Or you want to go out while you're on top, not go out of writing, but, like the athlete that doesn't.
You don't want the story to peter out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Just one more question before I hand you off to Jeff. I know that one thing that romance readers in general seem to have in common, with me at least, is binge reading, like reading voraciously once they find an author they like. And do you find that once somebody enters into any of your series, they're likely to read everything you've written, or do people sort of stick to certain series and certain settings for you?
Because my series is so closely intertwined, I think that people who get in and they like it, they do go through and read. I think the crossover is really high, but it's hard to get to censor that, because every once in a while you get the email that says, "Oh, I just discovered your books and I've just binge read, the whole first series. When's the next one coming?" And that's great. And the sell through is really good. I found out, it's funny because there's also trend chasing, and how many times we've heard in the last year and a half, "Oh, paranormal romance is dying," and yet, making pretty good money for my expectations. And I started a second series that's adventure romance, like contemporary, no werewolves in sight kind of thing. And the crossover is not that high because it's a totally different genre, and those just don't sell as well either. So as I go forward, my emphasis will be in paranormal romance, because when the genres are so wide apart, then the readers don't always. Some readers do, and they're very enthusiastic, and that's great. But others, they really just like that one element. Yeah.
Yep, that's it's one of the leading reasons to have a pen name. I understand it's just because you don't want people to have to guess over what the topic of the next book is going to be. They can just safely read everything you've written under a certain pen name because they know what that pen name writes.
Exactly, but you could do that with your covers too, right? Because my adventure romance has a beach and a sailboat, so no moon, no fangs, no claws anywhere on the cover. So the hints are all there, and I think it's pretty clear. I would hate to. I think there's a good reason for making a second pen name, but I would hate to try to keep up 2 platforms and 2 newsletters. Oh, I can't imagine. Can I imagine?
That's why I didn't do it.
Yeah.
That's all the questions I got. So I'm going to hand you off to Jeff for a few more.
All right.
All righty here. Okay. As Joe mentioned, P&R readers are voracious, typically snapping up the rest of the author's titles if they like their style. I don't read too many myself, but my wife is a huge fan. And every once in a while, it's interesting. Usually she tells me it's 50-50. Either she'll absolutely love the book or she absolutely hates it. And being an author, I always ask her, what about the book don't you like? And it usually comes back with, don't like how it ended, don't like how the guy is supposed to end up with a girl, the girl's supposed to end up with a guy. So obviously there's these readers expect certain tropes to actually be consistent throughout all the books. So my question to you is, what tropes do you feel that P&R books should contain to keep the readers happy?
Right. There's some things that you absolutely have to have. You have to have the happy end. You have to have the alpha hero. You have to have, I was going to say you have to have the villain, but actually there's some very successful books that don't have much of an external conflict. But I think you can play around quite a bit. The big trend, vampire is a big trend. I personally don't write vampires. A lot of people expect, what is it? Is it BBW? It's kind of like big and beautiful heroine. All right, so they're not like super, and almost all of. I tried in one book, and my heart just wasn't it. You have to write what you know. And I'm an athlete. I write athletic heroines, and my tagline is putting the hero back into heroine. So I think you can kind of deviate. And for example, a lot of shifter books will have as the plot that guy, the hero, is the shifter, and he must keep this terrible secret from the human who he's fallen desperately in love with. I've turned that around quite a few times and gotten a lot of positive comments. So it's the heroine who's a werewolf, and how is she possibly going to make this work with this human? But in the end, hooray! And so I think you can bend them a little bit. I think it seems to me if you have characters that connect, you have to have that strong hero. But characters that connect. In my case, I like also. Setting is really important to me personally. It's just something I really enjoy. I like traveling, and a place is really important to me. And for me, that comes through in my books. And I don't think you have to have that in P&R, but it has worked to really infuse. Mine are set in Lindsay's area of the world, and it works really well. Desert, edgy, danger hidden around the corner kind of thing. So that might not be something expected from P&R, but it's certainly lends itself well to as opposed to being in Florida on the beach. So, which you could probably pull off, but I don't think I can pull it off.
Yeah, I hear you. You've got to write what you know. And I've been asked to like create characters, that appeal to other audiences, and I've tried, but it comes through loud and clear that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So
Right.
my wife's like, maybe you should cut this character out or redo it or something or other there. So, okay, what do you feel are some common mistakes other PNR authors are making that could easily be avoided? Lackluster covers, unengaging characters. What do you think?
Oh, it's so hard to say because you look at some of the top selling books. If you look at the top 10, and every once in a while I look at them and I'll read this one or that one, and some are just amazing, fantastic books. You're like, wow, that really deserves to be number one. And other ones you read and you're kind of like, wow, that's the top of the list for a long time. And they make it work. It's really hard to say. Like the author is not necessarily the audience of their own book or of the genre. So I guess I wouldn't want to comment on the common mistakes in the genre. I mean, there's some pretty awful covers sometimes, but you see awful covers on the bestseller list.
No rhyme or reason to it. I
right?
would agree.
And
same thing with fantasy.
Right. And there's some covers you think, oh, this is my favorite cover. And your readers might say, oh, I absolutely love that other cover, which is your least favorite cover. But yeah, you have to have professional covers. The series branding, I was lucky that I started with a really strong cover artist who made a fantastic brand that went across the series. That and, the standard things that you must have, good cover, you must have good editing. I'll throw in one other thing that kind of links to what I started saying before, which is about the good advice that you get, that especially as a first-time author, it's really good to have. You really need good editing, and you really need, perhaps it makes sense to get a developmental editor for your first book. And I thought that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to do that. I want the first book to be really good. And I did a lot of research, and I found an editor, developmental editor who has a strong resume working for Harlequin and these kind of things, those kind of traditional publishers. And I thought, okay, it's worth the money. So I sent my first book to a developmental editor. And actually, in my case, even though she definitely had a strong background, it was not worthwhile in the end. I'm trying to put it nicely. It was $1,000 I paid for developmental edit that my critique partner for free gave me much better, much more direct advice. So if you can get a couple of good critique partners, and the question is, what makes a good critique partner? Until you do it, you don't know. That's always a difficult. That's the hardest thing.
That's a good way to describe it.
Right. But lucky me, I had a couple of good critiques partners right away, and you could their advice right away is just so direct. And them as authors, they're very aware of their craft, and they're very good at pinpointing what you're missing in this passage is X. Whereas the developmental author was trying to change the dialogue and trying to change the style. And she actually at one point had the cowboy saying something like, perhaps something like, what cowboy says perhaps? Like, no. And that was just one of many comments that I thought. So that was not a good choice for me, a good decision in the end. So if you can find good critique partners, and you just go out on forums and offer, I'll read yours, can you read mine? And you will find some people that you're a good match with, and people that maybe you're not a good match with, but okay. Of course, the more people read for you, the more you have to read for them. So it's a two-way street, and it can take up a lot of time. But once you establish a couple of good relationships, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think most people probably won't realize when they're first starting out that a lot of indie authors will willingly help out other indie authors because they say, hey, I've been there, done that. Let me give you a hand. You want to read mine, I'll read yours. And I have found that if you can find someone whose style is similar to yours, and you actually enjoy their writing, it's like, hey, contact them. Most of the times with an indie author, you can find them, whether they're on Facebook, whether they have their own personal blog. You can leave a message saying, hey, what do you think? Well, as you're saying, what do you think if I look at yours? Would you give me your opinion on mine? And yeah, you can find a really good group of a good support team that way. I've done that a few times too.
Right. And people were very, I think, independent, self-published authors are generally they know they're in the same boat, right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. It's a big thing. It's a big ask, right? It's a big favor to ask. But if you can reciprocate, yeah.
Exactly. All right. My final question for you in this category is, when you're writing, do you set goals for yourself? Like, for instance, are you trying to strive for a certain word count every day? Or do you tell yourself that, okay, this is what I do full time. I'm going to park my butt in front of this thing 8 hours a day at least and see how much I can get done? I mean, what do you do for yourself?
Yeah, I'm one of these kind of type A personalities. So yeah, I do have it. I have word count goals. I still work almost full time. So if I can, I try to write at least 500 words on a working day. So I'll wake up early before I go to my day job, and morning is a good time for me. So that's just 500 words a day. When I'm on the weekend or I have a vacation week, 5,000 a day is a good target for me. Like I'm really deep into, like, I really want to write this book. But if you don't have goals, you're not going to reach them. It doesn't work for me. And just before Christmas, I knew I had to finish up a book and I had been procrastinated. I was maybe a little burned out because I did a lot of writing in September and October. That November, I did a lot more promotion and things like that weren't writing. And it kind of kept pushing off starting the next project and pushing it off. And finally, I sat down with a calendar and said, chapter 1 has to be done between Monday and Tuesday. Yeah. And then you look at your calendar, you know that Wednesday's a busy day. Okay. But then chapter 2 has to be done between Thursday and Friday. It just has to be done. And that's great because I love having a list and I can tick it off the list and I feel good about myself. You need small intermediary goals. I used to run marathons, and you don't go out and say, I'm going to run 26 miles. Yeah. And that's my goal. No, your goal is the first 3 miles. Yeah. And then after that, your goal is 5 miles. And after that, your goal is 10 miles and so on. So you have to break it up into chunks.
Okay. Or in my case, my goal will be to run to the end of the driveway and check the mail and run back without collapsing in a wheezing fit.
There you go. There you go. But you know what I'm saying, right? Same thing that I can't, you're writing 100,000 word books, right? And now you've got your mystery series, right? You have to break it down. Right? It's the way I shouldn't say that everybody has to do it this way. But to me, even though I'm a very productive person and a self-disciplined person, if I don't actually have goals on a sheet of paper, things will slip. And something else appears in your inbox and you'll take care of it. And the writing won't get done.
Well, one quick question I just thought of, and I want to give you kind of like me. When I'm writing, you might as well just turn my room into a static room. I mean, no noise, no nothing, no internet. I'm kind of curious. Can you handle distraction, or do you try and give yourself just as quiet, serene environment as possible?
I'm a mom, so
Okay, so that just goes right out the window. Got it.
But I have very cooperative children, so I should say that. But at my day job, I have to concentrate very intently and drown out a lot of background noise. I'm a teacher in a school, and it's just constant noise. So I find it at home, I don't have to do it. I like quiet, but I don't have to. It doesn't have to be like, shut the door, everybody be quiet. It works. It seems like a quiet environment at home compared to the majority of my day. So, but I have to tell myself, you're not going to answer any email that pops in at any given moment, right? I think one just popped in. I'm not going to answer any of them, right? And I have finally turned off you can get these alerts, right?
Yeah.
That, you have 6 emails waiting for you. Well, it doesn't matter. They have 6. I'm not going to do my writing if I answer those 6 emails. So.
Yeah, I think they've got them now where they ignore them on the computer. It pops up on your phone. It pops up on your tablet. It's like, please read me. But I hear you. But okay, let me hand you back over to Lindsay, and she can start up the marketing side of questions.
All right, sounds good.
All right, cool. Before I jump in, I just want to say it's very inspiring that you're working full-time still and managing to publish so many books. I know you said they're not super long with the word count, but still, even if they're 40,000 to 50,000 words each, you're really doing well. And I think a lot of people, and it's an understandable excuse, but they'll use it as an excuse. I'm working full time. I have kids. That's why it's taken me 3 years to write this novel. Or in my case, I was addicted to World of Warcraft, so it took me 7 years to write my first novel. But it can be done. And like you said, if you just chop it up into a few hundred words a day, it totally adds up over time.
Absolutely. And you do have to, like I'm sure all of you have done, you have to set your priorities, right? Like, I want to be a successful author, so I'm not running marathons anymore, right? I can't do everything. I can't do full-time and the kids and the writing and that amount of exercise. So that goes. And I used to spend the evenings, with maybe half an hour of TV, waste of my time, right? So that's the time to answer those 6 emails. Yeah, or to send out the next arc or whatever might be doing. So yeah, I think you have to really be disciplined with your time. Not run yourself into the ground, but figure out what works well for you at what time of day and use the time well.
Definitely. It's sometimes it's about knowing what you have to give up in order to get what you really want, I guess.
Right.
Let me go ahead and ask a question from YouTube. William asks, you mentioned releasing 3 books. Do you think it's better to release 3 books all at once, like the same week, or to roll them out 1 month after the other if you've kind of saved them up the way you did?
It's a good question. I would, if I was even faster, because I would experiment with that. I think I might try someday to do 2 weeks apart. I think all at once, you're leaving a gap open later in your year, right? Because even if you're super prolific and you're releasing 3 at once, then there's going to be a gap, and all the brouhaha happens all at one time. So it seems to me you do want to spread them out at a reasonable. And it works well to do it a month apart or 3 weeks apart. My new series that I'll be coming out with in the spring, I think I'm going to shoot for 3 weeks apart. That it doesn't seem like, oh, a whole month away to the next book. So I think you can kind of get more out of it by stretching it a little bit, but I haven't tried both to see. I've always just done a month apart or 3 weeks apart. I'm a fan of pre-orders, and I like to have the next one as a pre-order live, so that the minute a person finishes book 1, they can click and already buy book 2, even though it might not be available. So I might, for example, like last spring, I had 3 that I did in quick succession, and book 4, I had the pre-order that was coming in September. So there was a gap from end of June to September, but the buy link was right there. And I'm a big fan of, if you turned it around the other way, if you couldn't release that quickly at all, I would try to do a 3-month interval that you can get a book out, and then so that you can have a live pre-order link in book 1. So on Amazon, that's 3 months ahead. So that book 2 is out 3 months later, and then book 3 is 3 months after that. I don't think that's ideal, but I think it still works because you have the pre-orders going. And you might not get a lot of traction until you get into book 2 or book 3. But I do think the shorter intervals works better. By shorter, I mean 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month.
Yeah, and we should say it's not like it's set in stone. You can kind of release the first book and gauge, like if it's really doing well, maybe you want to bump those releases up and kind of strike while the iron is hot, or at least have the pre-orders available so people can grab them before they forget about you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people do. I did experiments in my first year. So I read that all pre-orders maybe not so good, because then your release week, release day, release week ranks are not as high because your sales are being spread out over a longer period. So I did an experiment. So I looked at the numbers of my book 4 in my first series that I had a 3-month pre-order, and I looked at the release week ranks. And then for book 5, I did not do a pre-order. And it started at the exact same rank as the book that had the long pre-order. And this one had no pre-order. So if you're at my level, and I can launch into sub 1,000 overall at Amazon, but I won't be there for long. That in release week, I'm maybe in the thousands. So Amazon top, between 1,000 and maybe 10,000 in the first week. You don't get the negative side of pre-orders if you're at that level. If you're one of these super amazing bestsellers that you might make you USA Today just in your release week, well, okay, then hold back. Yeah, or you could, I guess, no, you could do it with a pre-order, that works too. But if you really want the rankings on release week, unless you're really releasing with that incredible bang, I think it makes more sense to have pre-order, and you're capturing all those people who were excited 3 months ago, but your book wasn't ready, and now you've lost them if you didn't have the pre-order. So I personally like it a lot.
Yeah, I've definitely done pre-orders on later books in the series too, where maybe it's not as big of a deal if it debuts as high as possible in the Amazon top 1,000 or top 500 or whatever you're hoping for. and I think you make more money that way if you had it out there available for a couple of months, because you are getting those people that were, because the voracious readers will forget about you. I mean, your diehard fans won't, but some people enjoy a series and they'll buy the next one if it's available right away. But if it's not till 4 months later, maybe they don't remember about you, or they don't remember about you right away.
Yeah, exactly. So I try to end all my books with a pre-order link to the next book, and it has first chapter 1. So very often I'll finish a book and I'll quick, I have to write chapter 1 of the next book. I absolutely must get, and chapter 1 might change eventually, but okay, you get in something catchy. So like I said, I don't like cliffhangers, but to put in chapter 1 of the next book at the end of the current book, it's not a cliffhanger, but it's putting the hook to, and you've got the buy link right there. I think it's a good way to capture your readers.
Yeah, and including that chapter 1 seems like a really good idea in romance, especially where it is going to be a different couple. So maybe it wouldn't be quite as much of an auto buy for the reader if they really like that one character, the set of characters, and then they're like, well, but if they've read the first chapter because it was there, why wouldn't they read it? Maybe they get invested in that first chapter and they do want to go on.
But hopefully, I've learned though you do want in book 1, even though book 1 is about couple 1, you do want people to be invested in the nice guy who appears every once in a while. Yeah, and he's a little mysterious, right? We don't know why he's so broody and got this mysterious past, and so you're just dying to find out. You can plant all of that without taking away from the story of book 1, because if book 1 is just about 2 people, it's nice to have other people in there too, right? You can play off them and such. But as I think it behooves you to make character number 2 really interesting in book 1 without stealing the show. So even without that first chapter, they're going, oh, and it's clear to the reader that the next book is going to be about that character. So they really want that next book.
Definitely, that makes a lot of sense, and I think we've talked about that a little bit with romance before, that you do need to do things like that in order to, you don't have to, but it makes a lot of sense to seed that, to get them excited about the next set of characters.
Yep.
All right, you mentioned earlier that you kind of started an ARC team pretty early on. Could you tell us how you went about getting some people to, and for those listening that don't know what ARCs are, advanced review copies, and the whole goal is to get a bunch of reviews from these people that get them within the first week or so. Could you tell us how you went about doing it and kind of how important that's been for you?
Yeah, it was. I started out by going on the Facebook groups that are genre specific, and it's easier said in paranormal romance than maybe in some other genres, because there's groups of 10,000 readers out there. And in the very beginning, I just went on and said, I have 10 review copies of my very first book. Who would like to review it? And I built up over time to maybe about 50 readers. And right now I have a team of about 100 people, of which I can count on 50 to release, to put their reviews up in the first week. And the other ones kind of come, you need to nudge them a bit. But how I got started was on Facebook groups and just open call. Here's a copy. And I learned quickly, you need to provide all the information, right? So you send them an email that has, here's how you get your free copy. And I use InstaFreebie for that. Here's the Amazon link where you need to post your review. Here's a Goodreads link. It's releasing on this date, and send them a reminder on that date. And if they haven't reviewed in 2 weeks, I send another reminder. Very nice, polite, nudge, nudge. The book's been out. I really need your review up, please. And it takes time to do that. I think that's the step not so many authors, they say they don't have the time to do, but I think it really makes sense to make the time to do that, because if you have a good, strong ARC team, you release and you immediately have 30, 40, 50, 60 reviews, strong reviews that set the tone, and they make good quotable quotes. And I'll immediately take out a couple quotes and put them in the editorial section, so they kind of highlight them. So I send my books also for reviews by reviewers, like bloggers, and those make really good quotes. But I'll put little sections. Readers are saying, what a great series. I absolutely love Anna Lowe's new book, this kind of thing. So you can get little sound bites out of those. But I think to do it well, you need to follow up. Now, since I built up, in the beginning, you can't be picky, but I think I would from the beginning ask I would love, send an invitation, please join the ARC team. But to do so, there's one thing you have to do, and that's send me a link to an existing review, because this shows you that the person has actually written some reviews in the past and they know how to send a link. Because in my very first few group, you get these really enthusiastic, lovely people. Oh yes, absolutely, I'll review for you. And then they start asking, how do I review? How do I, and it's just this long labor. You go to Amazon and you go, see down there, you got to go down. No, scroll a little more. And you're trying to explain to them, and it's really time consuming. So now I have that as a prerequisite. And now I can say, I need you to have reviewed one of my books. And it could be one of the 3 free stories that I give as for people who subscribe to my newsletter. I don't care what book it is, but you have to send me a review of one of my books, and then I'll add you to the team. And once you've reviewed a book, I tick you off my list, and I'll send you the next one. And that works really well, because in the past I was an ARC reader for authors, and you got the free copy, but they didn't follow up, right? They might not remind you on release day. They might not actually. There was some that didn't even send a thank you, which it's a two-way street. Yes, you get a free book, but in exchange you get a review, or in exchange I shouldn't say, right? So I write individual thanks yous. And so yeah, around release time, it's quite an intense time, and I spend a couple hours doing that. But I think it works really well. So you get people who are serious about writing reviews and who will post promptly and who you can count on. But I think you have to put a little time into building that up.
Okay, and how do you keep track of who actually posted a review? Do you ask them to email you the link back to it after they've posted it?
Exactly. So once the book goes live, I send out a reminder, today's release day, please post your reviews. And please post your reviews and send me the link. And so they send me the link, and then I put it in my spreadsheet that Lindsay has reviewed on Amazon. And I write back, thanks a lot, Lindsay. That's so great. I really appreciate your time. I'll be sending you book 1 and book 2 in about a month. So talk to you soon. Something like that. So I have a spreadsheet, and every once in a while somebody will write back and say, I've just had an operation, or this, things are really hard right now, or I'm really busy. So I'll make a note in the spreadsheet, and that's fine too. So that way you can be quite human about it too. It's not like, you are late, you're off the list. I don't want to be like that. But I do need people to review of the books. You hear from a lot of authors, I sent 100 ARC reviews and I only got 5 or 10 or 15 reviews. I don't want to feed the world with free copies of my book if they're telling me they're going to review. If you tell me you're going to review, you have to review. I expect you to review. And I will follow up in a very nice way.
You sound very organized. I'm daunted by the idea of maintaining a spreadsheet. I have to admit, I'm one of those people that just sends the copies and is like, okay, if they review, awesome. If they don't, I don't really care. But no, I love that you do that and you make the time. And I think people, if they send me a link, but I don't follow up with anybody, or I don't require them to do that, or I haven't in the past. So yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's probably really worth the time if you really do want to just kind of keep the list small of people who are actually reviewing each book they get.
Yeah, and like my latest review, I just sent one to 80 people, the next one to 80 people, and it's time consuming that first week, that release week. But it's nice. You get the people you can really count on, and you get some positive feedback, and that's nice too, right? And you get the individual interaction, and you start to build relationships. And it turns out that these people are also the ones who are promoting you on Facebook. They're like, great new book by Anna Lowe. So there's all kinds of little cyber friendships that come out of that, and extra support. And out of that, what I eventually ended up doing is looking at, some reviews are very quick. Great book, period. Buy it. And some are really incredibly well written and detailed, and they really put time into it. And I started noticing who did that. And I made a small group, and now I have a plot. I call it my Plot Wizards group. And I have a small secret group on Facebook that I invited those ARC readers to join. So when I'm stuck on a plot point, I present it there. And they have some great ideas. So that's kind of an offshoot. That's something that grew out of the ARC team that I didn't see coming, but it's been really great. So when I get to a point that I'm stuck, I can bounce ideas off them. And many times it's not actually their ideas that I'll take, but they will then spur an idea that I didn't have. So that's been a nice thing too.
Awesome. That's a great use of reviewers that I don't think I've ever heard anybody mention before. And it makes sense. There's definitely people who have a really great eye for just certain things. And you're almost like getting a free critique when they write up the review.
Exactly. So, and a couple of them, the ones who are really the most eloquent, and I asked some of them to be beta readers. So now I have a couple of extra beta readers in addition to the critique partners, authors that I have. But I should mention, actually, I made some notes, and there's two things I tried for ARCs that don't work. So that don't work for me. So I'll mention those two. I have right at the end of every book, not as a separate chapter, but at the end of the last chapter is a little thank you section. And it says, as I'm sure many of you do, please leave a review of the book. And I get so few reviews of that. And even my first series, I made a public statement in there. If you review book 1 and send me the link, I'm happy to send you book 2 free. And it's incredible how many people don't take up free offers or just simply don't review. So I find it's good to have that, obviously, but it's not, I really wouldn't count on it. They kind of trickle in, which is nice, but if you want reviews to come up immediately on release week, for me, that wasn't effective. And there was a second thing. I read another author, I can't remember her name, but she had a really neat idea. So I tried it too. She said, to her whole newsletter list, she said, once we reach 50 reviews, because you cannot reward reviewers, it's not allowed. But she said, once we reach 50 reviews, I'll publish a free extra, so a little bonus scene. Yeah. And once we get to 100 reviews, I'll publish another bonus scene. And I did that for one of my books, and it totally didn't work. I had these little bonus scenes ready to go, and it did not garner any more reviews than normally, even though I was like, hey guys, you could get this, that kind of collective, if I do my part for the group, it doesn't work. It needs to be, they need to feel the personal, like, I really need you, Lindsay, or you, Joe, I'm counting on you here, and not, hey, you guys, can you please, right? Hey, you guys doesn't work. But on the other side, what did work too is I picked this is somebody else's idea too. Summer can be really slow. Is summer slow for you too? Yes.
Depends.
Yeah.
If it's an existing series and it's a release, summers are actually usually pretty good with me if I keep releasing. But I've definitely heard from some other authors that things are very seasonal, and they can kind of see it every year that certain months are slower.
I haven't been doing it I have 2 Augusts behind me, and they've both been really slow. So last August, I made one book free that I wasn't going to make free, and another book 99 cents. And I sent it to my newsletter list saying, guys, please, this is my gift to you, but I really want reviews. Can you please, this is and interestingly, after a week, almost no reviews came in. And I sent another email saying, I think we can do better than this, guys. I said, I made the book free and I made the other 99 cents so they could get reviews. So can you please rate? And on that second reminder, then like 70 reviews came in for each of those titles. So I will definitely do that again. When there's a slow month, nothing much is happening anyway, I'll take some titles that are kind of low in review numbers and make the price, either make it free, which will still give you a verified purchase review, right? Unless Amazon has changed the policy again, or 99 cents. And then they're more willing to buy it and review. So.
All right, cool. This is a lot of good advice on reviews, and that was interesting that didn't work for you. The person who said, "Oh, when you do 50, I'll post something," because I think that was someone on our show. I don't remember who, but I remember hearing that advice from someone, and I think I've seen it elsewhere too. And I remember thinking, "Oh, I should try that," but I never got around to it. So I guess I'm not regretful now.
Well, maybe it works. Maybe it works for some people, but it did not work for me. But it all was not lost. I then put those eventually. Republished that in a new bonus edition, which these 2 scenes that I had ready to go anyway, and now I have an extra marketing tool out there.
All right, cool. Well, I was actually thinking about that, and I think I could imagine it working maybe better on a series where you've had the same characters for like 6 books, like an epic fantasy or something, where I feel like you're just gonna be more invested in the characters after that much time if you're still reading. Whereas I don't know, when I read romances, I love them at the moment, but then I read the next one and I kind of forget about that first set of characters. So I don't know. It's just a theory. It could be just nothing.
You have a fickle heart.
Yeah, but I am such a character reader. I love series, so that's why I don't do romance, don't read them that much, because I really want to read about the same characters for like 8 books or 10 books, because I fall in love with them, and I'd be the person like, oh, I don't do reviews, but I would if Bujold says she's going to give me a Miles Vorkus an extra tidbit on her blog. So,
right. I try to balance that in the books. I try to get the past characters in book 2. You know, in book 3, you might see the past characters, so that you still see that, but you have to balance it so it's not like people who haven't read book 1 are like, who the heck is this guy? Yeah, but to sneak it in. My frame of reference, do you guys are old enough to have seen Robin Hood, the one with Kevin Costner?
Yes, I loved that.
And
I was like 12. It was awesome.
Right. But like at the end, Sean Connery comes in, right? Oh my God, I just gave it away. Sean Connery comes in, right? And there's a moment where the whole theater goes, oh, it's him. And I love doing that with, I will never get the Sean Connery effect because Sean Connery is Sean Connery, but every book, just put in one of those moments that key character comes in, and it doesn't take, if you didn't know Sean Connery and you watched that Robin Hood movie, you would still like the Robin Hood movie, right? Didn't take it away. But if you know him, you're like, oh, so cool. I got to see Sean Connery. So to build in the past characters, just give them that one little shining moment is I think a nice way to do it too.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. And then if they did come on when you had book 4 free, they'll get to see that character and be curious to go find out his story or her story.
Exactly.
All right, I guess we've been talking for an hour already here, so I better hand you to the guys and let them ask their questions.
Perfect.
Yep. I had something about e-arc, but I mean arcs, but you've already covered those, so I'm just gonna fortunately move on. Audiobooks. I see you've got a few audiobooks. How did those get made?
That's a kind of a new thing for me. So I went on ACX, and so I have books 1 and 2 of my first Twin Moon series in audio, and books 1 and 2 of the Blue Moon Saloon series in audio. And I got advice from forums and such. It took a little, you have to learn about it, I guess, and learn by making mistakes. So I got what I thought was a great narrator for the first book, and I loved her voice, but she turns out she didn't have fantastic producer skills. So that was a big problem. So that when a little word had to be corrected, it's not seamless. Like you can really hear the audio cut, and that delayed it and caused a lot of frustration. And she managed in the end to smooth them over, but it was a lot of heartache. So I went with a different narrator for book 2, who is fantastic voice and great producing skills. And her name is Kelsey Osborne. And for $100 per finished hour, which is very good rate, I pay up front. I don't want to share royalties. I made the books through ACX and with her. Because they're short books, my books, 40,000 words, are roughly 4 hours. So that's an advantage and a disadvantage because they're not very expensive to produce. But a lot of audio readers, if you are paying with, is it called points? Or you have so many credits it's called. You're more likely to buy a longer book with your credits than a shorter book with your credits. So I've had book 1 out since maybe March of 2016, and it's paid itself off in the first 6 months. So it paid itself off, and book 2 is on its way, and it's only been out for 4 months, so it's halfway paid itself off. So they're slowly getting traction, but it's quite hard. I find it hard to advertise, to find audio readers. You get 25 free audio codes that you can get free copies for review. And it's actually hard to find people who like, I really have to solicit, and I've gone through my ARC team and say, guys, would you like to try audio, or do you already do audio? A new thing I've tried, because of the issue of having short books and maybe people are not so keen to use their credits on shorter books, if I bundled books 1 and 2 together into a new bundle. And I thought, well, this could be a good marketing tool for me anyway, to have that bundle that I can maybe get a book club on. But mainly to push the audio. So now I have an 8-hour book for 1 credit. And that might cannibalize the sales of the other ones, but I don't care, because to get the same, I've just paid her an extra $100. She already did books 1 and 2 of the second series. So I paid her an extra $100 to put them together with a little new introduction, and bundled them all up. And so now I have another, and then that's started, but it's only been out for like 2 weeks. So I can't say anything conclusively, but I think that that's a good way to do it too. I kind of wish I had done them closer to the release of the original book. I kind of waited a while and say, oh, maybe I'll, eventually I'll get to audio, and it probably would have been done good to do when this book was a fresh release. But I think they'll all pay themselves off pretty quickly, because I managed to get what I think is a really good narrator for a very good price. But I remember Lindsay talking about one of your longer books, and of course it's going to be much higher costs. So it wasn't a very high risk level for me. And I have tried, and I'll do it again. We had a fairly successful, I pulled together, like, if you want something to happen, do it yourself, right? So I got an audio PNR cross promotion going, and we got 25 or 30 authors to all throw in a book and just push it that way. But it still is, it's a new audience that I'm still, if I had the magic key to reach them, it would be great. But sales are steady, but it's going to take a little time.
Yeah, we've heard from a lot of people that an audiobook is a useful thing to have from a marketing perspective, but it's a nearly impossible thing to market. And let me tell you that if you're on your way to paying them back after just a couple of months, congratulations, because that has not been my experience.
Right, but
So
like the costs are low. But what I'm going to do now, I think more, is if a person buys the ebook, you can get the audio for much cheaper, right? I think it's $1.99. So I'm going to do many more sales. Whenever book 1 is on sale, I'm going to push the audio aspect like crazy, and put those promotions together. Not only is book 1 99 cents, but there's an audio, and that way you'll get it for only $1.99. So I'm going to be a little more. I'm going to try to put them together in the future.
That's definitely a good idea. And just one more reasonably quick question here. We talked a little bit about covers. So obviously there's a couple of, you had said how you sort of want to set the appropriate tone with your cover so people know what they're getting into. Do you feel like there's any value in standing out with your cover, or do you think that the cover's purpose is just to inform the reader of the content and then stand out in other ways?
I think if you can stand out, yeah, anything that, because if you look at the lineup, why does your eye go to that book instead of that book? You want that book to be your book, right? You want your book to be the one that people pick out, or that people recognize. Yeah, they say, it's a series and it's a professional cover, and I can see that I get, if I'm going to like this, because there's nothing worse than reading a good book and there's no more, right? You want more. This is the first thing you want, is more books from the same author. So if you see that there's more to come, so if you can get something to stand out, but of course it's hard, right? There's so many covers and only so many pictures in the what do you call it, in the stock photo sites, and only so many ways it's been done. So if you can stand out, but I think the branding is probably, to me, the most important aspect. And like many people have said, if you get the covers wrong, you can redo the covers. But I've been lucky. I think that I've had really good cover designers who've done really nice designs.
Yeah, that's absolutely so. And yeah, I definitely feel that the brand, getting people to recognize one of your covers out of a lineup of a bunch of covers, is sometimes even more useful than just standing out amongst others covers, because then you can get people, even people who aren't on your newsletter and people who don't follow you closely, will spot your book on the list and be like, oh, that's a new book from so and so, and download it. So branding, very important.
And I think, well, like when I'm doing the second or third cover, I'll put them side to side with the first cover, right? When the third cover comes in, I'll line them all up and make sure, okay, the hero was on the left, so now the hero is going to be on the right, and the moon was on the left, and now the moon is going to be not a full moon, it's going to be half moon, and to kind of have like a little bit of a variation in there too, that they line up and they look nice when they're lined up.
Excellent advice. That's it for me, so we'll finish off with Jeff.
Alrighty, you mentioned you have numerous Facebook groups that you've created, and you have people join in and help you with certain things. Have you experimented or tried any Facebook ads or Amazon ads? And if so, do you feel it was worth it?
That's I'm an author. I'm not a techie, and I'm one of those people that when I started out, like you hear a lot of people like, "Oh, I just want to write. I don't want to market." So I've grown a lot, and I can do a lot of promotions, but I have not. If I keep saying when I get serious and my next series comes out, that's when I'm going to finally tackle Facebook ads. But what I'm really waiting for is my husband to quit his job, and so I can just hire him and get him to write the Facebook ads. Because no, I have not figured them out. And I hired a company to do Facebook ads for me, and some people have good results with them, and I was quite disappointed. I mean, I know enough that you can boost to this audience and people who like this series, but they didn't do. I could have done a better job than them, and I don't really know. But it's really hard because I still have my job, and this is what I tell myself. I'm like, no, you really got to do this, Anna. You got to get the face. Everybody's doing Facebook ads. You must do Facebook ads too. It's going to be great. I've got kids. I got a full-time job. I want to write the next book. Something's got to go. And right now, I'm not dealing with Facebook ads. I'm writing the next book. It gives me more personal satisfaction, and because I'm the kind of person I'm cursing at the computer when I'm trying. I'm hating Facebook and ready to write them hate mail, but you can't write them hate mail because you can't reach them, right? Because there's nobody there, right? So I have not chosen to fight that battle yet. So maybe have me back.
Well, we can certainly do that because there's quite a few of us that are like, okay, what's the magic combination to make all the people at Facebook take notes? Like, oh, let's go ahead and give this book a try. But yeah, I've experimented a few times, neutral, where I've broken even, but nothing astronomically insane. So, but yeah, we've had some people that say, yeah, works really good. Of course, they do it every single time they do a book release. I'm like, well, you're gonna have to let us know what that magic formula is because I don't know what it is just yet.
Yeah.
But okay, so aside from Facebook, do you have much social presence on any of the other platforms? Are there any you
No.
prefer over others?
Yeah, no, same thing. I'm not I wouldn't choose to do much social media personally. So Facebook it was a big stretch for me in the beginning. And now I can handle it, and that's good. But no, I don't Twitter, and I don't Pinterest, and I mean, I have accounts, but I don't do anything with them. I kind of gave up on those.
I was so glad to hear you say you don't Twitter. You didn't say you don't tweet because I've never tweeted anything or Twittered anything, and I've yet to see the logic in doing so. But yeah, there's some of us, Joe. There's some of us that actually do like to use Twitter there. But yeah, see, I haven't used it yet. I'm just curious how other authors feel about that. But
Yeah.
let's see. My final question is about mailing lists, which I've already heard you answer. So that's about it for me. So let me pass you back over to Lindsay. We can see if we can wrap this up for you.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're keeping you up late over there in
Yeah.
New York, and if you're still on German time, I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
All right, well, I think we've gotten a lot of great information here, so why don't you just finish up by telling us what you're working on now, or if you have anything that you'd like to plug, and for our readers or listeners, as they may most likely will be, anything you want them to check out.
Yeah, thanks. I have a book releasing on January 5th. It's called Deception, and it's book 4 in the Blue Moon Saloon series. And then I have in March, book 6 in the Twin Moon series, and that book is called Desert Roots. And then later in the spring, I have my new series, but has yet to find a name. So that's what's happening right now. And I'm at www.annalowebooks.com, where I have some bonus materials too, which is kind of fun. I write a little thing about the making of every story, like how I got the idea and where the characters came from and what changed as I wrote the book. So if you're curious, that might be something fun to look at, the bonus materials section of the website.
All right, sounds good. And your books are on Amazon and KDP Select right now, is that right?
That's right. Same kind of thing. If I was dependent on the income, I would be wide. But right now I'm on a 6-year plan. It's 6 years until I put everything into full time. So
you've got a spreadsheet about it, don't you?
I do. And it just, I can't do more than what I'm already doing. So it works really well for me just to stick with Amazon.
All right, cool. I will put the link to your website and your page on Amazon in the show notes. This is episode 113, and you guys can come by and leave a comment or check out the links at marketingsff.com. Oh, and just to let you know, we're taking next week off, so there will not be a show, but we'll be back the second week of January. Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for coming by, Anna.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. It's great meeting you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you too, Anna. Thanks for all the info.
So long, everybody.
Bye-bye.